Welcome to the Suffolk Legal Innovation Technology Lab's document assembly line workshops. Today's topic is coding Docassemble interviews with AI, and it's a community session, so I hope to hear from all of you. First, this workshop is being recorded, and we will share it on our YouTube channel. You'll be able to find it on our blog at suffolklitlab.org or on YouTube by searching for Suffolk Lit Lab. If you're participating live on Zoom, please feel free to ask questions. Today is a participatory session, so unmute yourself. No need to raise your hand. Just chime in. But if I do see things in the chat as well, I'll try and call those out as we go. And it often helps to share your screen to demonstrate what you're talking about or a problem, and please feel free to do so. If you're hearing about the Lit Lab or the document assembly line for the first time, head over to suffolklitlab.org to learn more. All right, let's get started. Like I said, today is a community session where I'm hoping to learn as much from you as I am able to share. If somebody wants to kick it off I know some of you are using AI a lot to build Docassemble interviews, and some I may not know so much about. So if somebody wants to kick it off, fine. Otherwise, I'll keep mumbling and can pull up my screen and show some of the small ways I've been using it. All right, I'll show what I do. There's a couple ways to do it. I tend to use Docassemble or tend to use AI in VS Code, which is a coding editor. And I'll go ahead and pull that up. Let me just grab I'll grab the interview repository I use for training. And let me just resize. Low computer. There we go. If you haven't, all right, here we go. If you haven't used VS Code before, it's worth a try. It doesn't like integrate with the playground. You have to open your interview repository separately in it, or you can copy and paste information into it. But it's just a text editor meant for coding. I don't use it with Docassemble a whole lot, but sometimes when I have questions, I'll pull things into it. And once you've connected it, let's see, there's blanket on where's the there are some extensions like GitHub Copilot and others for, I think it's just GitHub Copilot is the only one I actually use. And then you can open it in your sidebar. And so you can have access to an AI right here. And the reason to do it this way is it'll have access to your entire interview repository. And so if you ask it a question like, why is or isn't this working, it will do it. So let's break one and then see what happens. Let's see.
So Sam, when you say you'll have access, you have to open a folder, right? It doesn't the way you get to your far left panel is to go open folder, right? Because you can open a single file in VS Code and it won't open.
You can, but I've opened this as a GitHub project, as a repository.
Oh, I see. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm gonna remove the vertical pipe there from the code bar, and I tend to use it for things like this. Why is the code block on line 16 generating an error? So I might use it for bug checking and stuff like that. I have no idea if it's going to do it right. And I think the way this is set is it's on auto, so it can use any of these models. So it just circulates them around to try and keep it free or something like that. And yeah, there, it got the right thing with the pipe character. Good for you, Docassemble, or good for you, GitHub Copilot. Oh, interesting. It didn't fix it for me. It'll often update your code. But I can probably just say, and then I think there you go. And then it gives you its new line and the old one. And so you can always undo what it did if you don't like it, or you can push keep and get it. And now we're back to a working one. That was a fairly simple one. That's the most of the way I use AI when I'm coding is in VS Code for things like that. And you can also ask it to do things for you. Um, so if you're not super comfortable with code, we could add maybe we want to know if we want to find out if the user loves dogs or cats. Let's see. Sometimes it'll go really far. Sometimes it'll add it to the interview order. It'll add it to the attachment. It'll do all the stuff. I have no idea what it's going to do here. Um, it's not done yet. It just added that question. Let's just see how far it goes here. But if I just say, I tested this and the question doesn't show up. Apparently I have the thinking on, so show there. There you go. Now it added it to the mandatory code block, so I got that. And if I don't have an attachment block here, but I could keep going. So I think this is what people mean by vibe coding. And this is a very small, narrow version of that. And so I can undo all of that stuff if I don't like what it did, which I'm going to do because I don't want to mess up my repository. But you can also use it. I think Michelle was, or Caroline was alluding to, you could just copy and paste your code from the playground in here and then back if you wanted to, or you can just copy and paste your code from the playground into ChatGPT or Claude or something like that. But I don't know. That's about the limit of how I've played around with it. I haven't done much more than that, so I'm hoping you guys have some more interesting uses the way you've used it. Caroline, I know you have.
Yeah. I do all kinds of things with it, but it's mostly a, jump in at the deep end, right?
Well, what does that look like though? I'm curious.
So, let me just see, because I mean, I started off saying, here's 52 pages of answers, basically. So let me just, so a little bit of context is, so I'm at the Alaska court system and we're developing action plans. So we're not even doing forms yet. We're doing action plans for pro se people at court. So when they finish the interview, they have a list of steps to take if in particular situations. And one of those steps is the list of the forms to download and fill out.
Hmm.
But at least they know what forms to get, and that's a lot of the work, the pre-form assembly. So I started off just saying, give me all the questions that you would need to get these answers. So I just dove in, like, to see how much it could do. And I was using Chat GPT and Claude. But then I ended up, so I do that, and the other thing, and that didn't work. That was just too much, and it was giving me, it couldn't handle it, and I don't, my prompts aren't correct or anything like that. But I started getting more, more refined. So trying to give it smaller chunks of projects. So the other thing that I do is I use Michelle's AL Kiln tests. So I'll show you what I've got for tests, and I'll show you. Let's see, share screen. Okay. So, I've done various interviews, and I don't have a consistent, because I'm just learning all this stuff. I don't have a consistent way of doing stuff. So I'm sorry. I'm trying to move my Zoom bar out of the way. I don't have two screens today. So I'll start off with here's I'm doing protective orders, and almost always I have a bunch of questions already written in a Word doc, or I usually do a Word doc, and then so I've got one up here, I think. Protective order questions. So she gives me something like this. And then I format it to look like a Docassemble interview, because I mean, she doesn't use styles, she just uses highlighting, everything like that. So the first thing I do is I go through, I format it. A lot of this stuff I might be able to do with Chat GPT. I have had trouble downloading files from ChatGPT. It says it does it, and then it's in some sort of mysterious Google Drive somewhere or something. And I very
Weird.
seldom can actually download a file that ChatGPT creates.
Hmm.
I don't know what happens to it. It's
Mhm.
gone. But so a lot of the stuff I do manually, and I'm just figuring out what things I can ask it to do, and some of the stuff just drives me crazy. So I start off formatting the Word doc she gave me, and these are styles. These things, they're it's not direct formatting, they're styles. I'm not using it. This highlighting might be in there, but it's irrelevant. But it's also a style. So I can organize, I can use words with organizing these various sections. And when I do that, these are the questions. So obviously I make them either checkboxes or radio buttons. That's a clue to me what they're going to be. And then I put in the same style, the variable, and then also the value of the variable. And then this little blue is my is the code that I would put in. So I sort of go through this, and then I sort of figure out from the questions where you're supposed what the blue is the our Docassemble temp HTML templates that come up in the interview at the end. The yellow is the variables and the values. So I do this, and then I create this spreadsheet thing. Um, Actually, maybe this one's a better one. So this just for this, so I create these tests. First, I use these to help me figure out. So I use the variables and then give them values. And what I have found that I can do is if I do a fairly good spreadsheet, it gets a little bit confused when I say give me a combination of these. So these are various. So the user could these are
Do you
checkboxes.
just give this spreadsheet to ChatGPT
I
and ask it
give the
to?
spreadsheet to
Oh, okay.
ChatGPT, and then it writes my tests for me
Oh, for the ale kiln test. Yeah.
for the AL Kiln test. Now, this is just walking through the interview. This
Hmm.
what I haven't done is then put in the steps that it should get. But and the other thing I do is I do now pay for ChatGPT, but ChatGPT is whatever I pay for the minimum. It's sort of unlimited, and I just go, to ChatGPT, and so if I go AI ChatGPT, so the most recent thing and you can do these. You can have projects. So it's going to take a minute here. So here I'm doing protective orders. Um, so I don't know if I have. These are probably all build. Okay, so here, build feature file. So here's when I gave it the spreadsheet and the feature file. That's my AL Kiln test. So it builds it for me. And I have all of this stuff. I think you have to know how to do. You have to know how to do what you're asking ChatGPT to do. It just does what you know how to do on steroids, and then you have to go back and check it because it'll be wrong. There's stuff it'll be wrong, or it'll go down the wrong direction. It's given me a bunch of stuff lately. It's told me how to do things, and I say, no, that's wrong. This is what I want to do. But I use ChatGPT for sort of general overall something or other. And then I also you use VS Code, but I use Cursor. Um,
Oh, right.
and Cursor has it is I don't quite understand, but it's basically VS Code. It's like an AI version of Cursor, and I also pay for that. But I start with ChatGPT because I've never hit the limit in Cursor, but I think I can hit the limit quicker in Cursor. And I think Cursor, I don't know, you same thing as with what you do. You can choose your agent. Um, let's see, where is it? Oh, come on. Curse. Here it is. You can choose your agent. Um, but I don't know. I find it's more sophisticated. I find that the cursor gives me better answers than ChatGPT. So I'll just start with ChatGPT for like shot in the dark stuff, see what I get. And then I go to Cursor
Hmm.
for more refined, more helpful stuff. But I
Ryan,
had to go ahead.
Ryan had a question there. He was asking how you test this afterward. I'm curious, Ryan, what do you mean? Because one of the advantages of doing code is obviously if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So I'm curious what you're
Why
thinking.
is my how's
Yeah,
my here we go.
yeah. So like when the code base gets to a certain size, um, it might be hard for you to just kind of visually see what the error is, even if you put it into
Hmm.
like ChatGPT or an AI model. So do you just go
Oh, you mean
through,
when you're checking what they do? Is that what you're saying when you're checking what they produce?
right, and like it might have an error. I know in the past when I've used it to fix coding, it might fix something and it I think it's correct, but then I go through the app or whatever I'm making and it didn't fix what I wanted it to fix.
Hmm.
So I didn't
Hmm.
know if you had a like way that you check it
Well, I do.
afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I do get that. So the thing is, it'll tell you what it's fixing and why it's fixing it, right? So here, let me think if I have. So I've got my protective orders. So it just gave me a whole lot of ridiculous stuff. Um, I was having, go ahead, Michelle.
Um, I think, Ryan, are you talking about how to test your code base after it has changed something in your code base? That is are you asking something specific to AI, or are you asking about generally to test your code once you've written it?
Yeah, I meant generally. Like I saw your
Oh,
spreadsheet and you had certain criteria that you wanted it to hit, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe you ask it to fix something because it's not actually hitting those. Is there a way you can test like afterwards to see if it's
Ryan, let
No,
me
um
ask
no,
the
this.
background. Do you use Docassemble now?
I don't actually.
Okay,
Oh,
no, because I think you might be asking a question that sounds basic to us and isn't to you, and so that's easy. I'll just
Okay.
um, when like in the one that I was working on, for example, one of the clunky things about this is that I have to, I tend to use ChatGPT or AI agent in VS Code, but then I need to pull it back into the Docassemble playground to test it. And so I can show you briefly what that looks like. Caroline, I'm going to steal the share back from
mm-hmm,
you.
mm-hmm.
Um,
So this is an example of manually testing it, going through the
yeah,
interview manually and seeing how the form looks.
Right.
Um, I've been working on an automated testing framework called Kiln that does end-to-end tests um, with the interview. So you can, automate the tests and, you know, put them on. If you're familiar with what a CI is, you know you
I'm
Hmm.
you
not. I don't know
you
what a CI
schedule
is.
them. So
continuous integration.
that's like GitHub, Caroline, like automating it so that you modify the code and then it automatically goes through a testing process.
Okay. I'm
Mhm.
also interested in that if you have a chance to.
Okay.
We,
Um,
you know what, we have a whole workshop on that.
Okay.
yes.
Which maybe you'll probably get your fill of it from that. But so I might just show you a link to that. But this is what the playground for Docassemble looks like.
Okay.
Um, and you can pull your code from GitHub here. So you'd edit it in VS Code, commit it back to GitHub, and then you can pull it from GitHub into the playground where you can see your code again in a different way, and then you can run your code from here and see if it works or not. So.
Okay.
And then Michelle's is probably the more like for a developer who's a little bit further along and wants to have more of a flowy workflow. Doing AL kiln tests allow you to kind of test it a little bit more on the fly to make sure that it's doing what you expect it to do. But let's see, back in if you went to our blog,
If oh sure.
we have here our workshops. I'm trying to remember when it was. I know some things have changed.
There,
But
so yeah.
this is the one you're looking for. Back in November, Michelle did a whole session on AL kiln
Okay.
testing. So
But that it's also in the right now, Michelle, isn't it? It's in the context of Docassemble, right?
Yeah, ALKiln is
You can't
specifically
use it
for
for other
Docassemble.
code.
Okay.
No, not really.
Yeah,
There are testing frameworks for other code, and we can talk
right.
about those someday, but I think we'll stick to the, the
Mm-hmm.
topics today. Yeah.
And that way you'd get a feedback right in GitHub of did it pass or was there an error? So
Yeah.
you can
Okay.
skip a couple steps. So
All right, thanks.
Caroline, feel free to take over again if you're
Okay, so anyway, that spreadsheet, I give the spreadsheet to Chat GPT and say build me my tests, and it's built. I'm on like 335 tests. These are the tests that Michelle developed. I don't know what the whatever she developed something that allows us to write these feature files, run the feature files, and you can run the feature files in your own playground, or you can run them on GitHub, so that you can be programming away, not programming, but developing away on your own playground, and it doesn't slow down your server. You can keep working on your server while it's testing doing all your tests, and you can break the tests up into little pieces, which is fantastic. So I use AI for developing the tests, and also what I'm sort of thinking about I'm sort of on the fence sometimes, because you can spend hours on AI at doing something and then realize, I could have done this myself so much quicker. But for example, I have in my protective order right now, I have something like 30 or 40 tests for somebody who already has an order. I want to build tests for somebody who they're a petitioner who has an order, and then the respondent is the person who has the order against them. But the questions are almost identical, and the answers are almost identical, except you just have to change a few words. So I'm playing with the idea of just take all my petitioner tests and turn them into respondent tests and see what I get. And then, because there's all this copying and pasting, and if you're copying and pasting and you're building them, you can add some things or not add some things. It's much easier sometimes to review it than it takes hours to build it. So I could do that, or I can do a different spreadsheet, or I can ask it to do a different spreadsheet. I don't have a flow. I'm just trying all those different things. But then the other thing I will do, I'm getting really lazy now. I run my Docassemble interview, or I paste it into the playground, and I get an error. I'm like, ah! So I take the whole thing and I dump it into Chat GPT, and I said, where's the error? And they said, it's asking for this. I'm like, I know it's asking for that. Where is it asking for that? And sometimes it'll find it right away. Sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't, then I'll put it into Cursor, and Cursor generally finds it. And also, you have the advantage with Cursor that you don't with ChatGPT Online, where it can look at your whole repository. So it can tell you, oh, there's another file that's looking for this, or you've put this in. I did sort of go down the wrong path, because it's telling me to use this function get, which I don't want to use because I think it makes it sloppier. That's what I was doing yesterday. It was saying, well, if you're sure, blah, blah, blah. So I've actually gone through it. But so it will give you, red herrings. But that's why I say you have to know what you're doing so that you can try out what they're saying. And if you don't like it, then you redirect. And what I have found is it can get so stuck in the weeds. If you stay in that conversation, you'll never get out. But what you can do is you can start another one. You just start another conversation, another chat. And that helps. And that's the other nice thing. Sometimes I'll try it in Claude, which I don't pay for. I've got the free version of Claude. Sometimes I'll do ChatGPT, or I'll do Cursor. Kind of depends on my mood. But the other thing that the first thing we use AI for is when I do these, not everybody does this, but I mean, most people don't do what I do, but I do these action plans. They come up in HTML as accordions that you can expand and collapse. But I also have a Word doc that the user gets as a PDF. And I'm constantly trying to find ways to put the template, these steps or HTML templates in one place. So I'm actually not reproducing. And this is I haven't got the solution for that. But what I can do is the first time I used AI is I had the AL kiln tests, and then I used AI to write a Python program that would look at the Word output and make sure that the Word documents, it was its own test. So the AI wrote the Python that could test all my Word documents, because I was having a human being read 300 Word documents and comparing them with HTML to see where they're the same and where they're different, which is not an effective way to, not any good use of anybody's time. So the AI was good for that. I use it for errors, and there's something else I was going to say that I use it for, and I can't remember. Building the features. Shoot, there was one other thing that I really like it for, and I can't remember. So let somebody else talk, so I'm not taking over the whole thing.
Yeah, who else is I've definitely had mixed results with using it as an error checker, although it's usually more helpful than just log messages. And it's gotten
Yeah,
better. But
it
I've
saves me
gotten
a lot
some
of
really
time.
weird misdirection from AI bots as well for error checking, where they just sort of go off in a direction or
Yeah,
totally get stuck and churn for minutes and
yeah,
at a time. So,
yeah. I'd say in general, it does help me a lot. Um, but that's also, things like I make a lot of mistakes, like typos, and I get so
mhm,
excited when I'm coding, I forget to put the colon at I just think faster than I can write. And so I'm all over the place. So I find it helps with errors a lot.
mhm.
And
And
I'm getting lazy.
I think something you said too was, or at least something you alluded to is, I find it most useful to when I ask it to do things I already know how to do.
Always. Yeah.
Like I'm like where I'm delegating, not asking it to tell me how. But I also find like it has a much better grasp of the documentation than I do. So if there's
Mm-hmm.
a feature or a function or how to do something that like, I'm sure this thing is possible. I just don't know what it's called.
Right. You can't
Um,
find it in the documentation. Yeah.
yeah, is there a simple way to do this? And it will usually point me to the right place and maybe even draft it for me. Um,
Yeah.
And sometimes it starts modifying like three files and adding hundreds of lines of codes. And I'm like, no, I'm really sure that's not it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there a simpler way? And then it modifies one line. And I'm like, yes, why didn't we do that the first time?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so, so you
Oh, well,
kind of
there's
have to
also
know, you
there's
kind of have to
one
know what
other
you're
thing.
expecting to
Yeah.
see.
And Sam, the other thing is, what you're talking about, it's like the Sorcerer's Apprentice type of thing with that agent, where it's Michelle was helping me one day and it was finishing all of her lines and everything. And it was
Yeah.
like, wait, stop. Um, so
And half the
it'll do,
time it was fine, and half the time it wasn't finishing them the way I wanted
I
it
turned
to.
off that autocomplete, AI
yeah.
autocomplete. It was
Yes.
driving me crazy.
Yeah, and I mean sometimes it's great. That's the thing, but you can turn it off. I mean, it is a very powerful thing. Um, but you can tell it. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So, but the other thing you have to be careful of sometimes, I don't know if VS Code does this, but Cursor will do it, and it takes forever. Instead of modifying the file you're working on, it creates a new file. And
Mm,
then you've got so much extra. And if you're doing it on your computer, then you start to run out of room because it's creating all these new files. I mean, I'm on an old computer. I'm still running Windows 10, but that's another. I mean, there are these sort of drawbacks to it. Um, anyway, those are just the little red flags.
Emily, had you turned your video on to share?
Yeah. I don't use it a ton. I'm more of a skeptic for like environmental reasons and also and various other reasons, but the places where I do use it are pretty simple and like I usually like I try to solve like I don't know, I also like don't want to erode what little coding knowledge I have, so I like will try to solve the errors myself, but sometimes you get like it's just a syntax error and there's like no information about what the syntax error is. And for those I find Claude really almost always points me to the right thing very quickly. And I've used it then like I don't do a lot of writing like so for people who are less familiar, there's like the main Docassemble sort of language and stuff, and then if you want to do more sort of fancier things. You can write Python modules, and um, I'm not as familiar with those. So like there was a time when there was a Python module that exists that did something similar to what I wanted. It was like to do with stripping out punctuation or something, but it wasn't doing exactly what I wanted. And so I was like, here, this, can you do something like this Python module, except I want it to do this instead of that. I want it to, I forget what it was, but, and
Hmm.
it wrote me, it just modified the Python module and to make it do exactly what I needed it to do. And so that was super useful.
That seems like a really smart way to use it. When you give it an example of what you want, basically. Yeah.
I've found that within certain bounds, it can be useful in teaching
Hmm.
more about some coding principles.
Say more about that. What do you mean?
So, um, supposing one isn't familiar with a for loop, or in Python, a complex example is a with statement, which opens a file and makes sure that it's closed afterwards. You can say, okay, so, tell me about a with statement and what they do. And then you can learn at the same time, which is actually something that I think could be very powerful if people have the patience to go through that. And especially because I imagine LLMs do not get tired of answering your questions, no matter how many times you ask them or in how many words.
Hmm.
But then you gotta double check. Like if you can get some examples and know how to run them so that you can make sure that what ChatGPT is saying is
Hmm.
actually what it's saying. And, use the keywords you see in there to look up documentation outside of the LLM so that you can confirm what's going on. And it can give you a wider vocabulary. I will say, as a person who um, often tries to help out other people who are learning to code, and reviewing code from them in order to troubleshoot things. LLMs have made that much more complicated because I can't tell by reading their code what it is they do or don't understand about code, about the current environment, about when people copy and paste code from the internet, it's very easy to see, okay, this is a total mismatch here, right? So this is a copy and pasted bit of code. And with LLMs, there is some indication sometimes. There's some patterns that you go, all right, this is an LLM doing this. But there are a lot of other parts of the code that leave me going, how do I guide this person? How do I get them to the next stage in their learning and to a place where they can work independently? Because I don't know where they are now.
Mm.
Um, so I used to be able to see that by the kind of mistakes they were making, but um, it's becoming more challenging.
I think though, I mean, you're very much, it is one of the best tools I've ever come across for like getting unstuck. David loves the rule, like you shouldn't spin your wheels for more than 20 minutes before you ask for help. And I've
Hmm.
really tried to emphasize to students the place you can go for help could be, Claude or ChatGPT or GitHub Copilot, and I find why isn't it doing what I'm trying to make it do is usually pretty effective. Or how would I make it do something like this? Um,
And
and
then
so like, yeah,
when
go
the
ahead.
LLMs can't help people, they
Right.
come to humans, at which point I
Hmm.
can't tell what they need to know.
Well, I get that. Yeah. When it can
Well,
help,
that's
it's
also, I mean, that's just part of teaching anyway. I mean, they could have
It's
gotten
just
that
different.
info. Yeah, it's just it adds another layer. And
Yep.
and you're just saying, I mean, you're just saying that doesn't make it right or wrong. It just makes sometimes because I can show you when you're talking about that. I wanted my template, it was sort of this complicated thing, but to spit out this text petitioner asks, ask the court to change or extend your order. But extend only occurred some of the time. Extend only got defined some of the time. And so ChatGPT gave me this weird code, that I still don't quite understand, but it works. And one day I'll go back and break it down, and it's not anything I ever would have come up with.
But Caroline, something I often do is, okay, I see that you've given me, I've tested it. It does what you said it do. Why does it work? I'll often ask it to explain to me why it works, because, and I love this because in the pre-AI days of 2 years ago, I'd find my answer on Stack Exchange and I'd paste it in and it works, but I don't really know why. And now I can just say, tell me why this works. I don't understand why it does, or what is that symbol that I've never seen before? Yeah.
Well, I had a conversation with it last Friday afternoon. I said, I don't understand this. It's Friday afternoon. And they said, well, maybe it'll be easier to understand when you come back next week. And I did. It was like, oh, it made perfect sense. But I mean, it's that other kind of, there is that informality that is a little bit reassuring when you're feeling hysterical. And that whole thing that it did, I'm just not in the mood to I mean, like Emily says, she doesn't want to do it because she likes to challenge and learn from developing. Sometimes I don't want to learn anything. I just want to get her done. And if it gives me something and it works, then fine, I'll go back and learn it later. And the other thing is, it's like, lots of times we go to these workshops or we have meetings and you hear people talking about stuff that's way beyond your level, but at least you clock that somebody's doing this somewhere in your brain. And then 6 months later, you remember somebody talked about it and you can go back. And that's a nice thing about these chats. You can go back or you can go into your code and you say, I know I did this. Where is it? And then why is it working? Your brain is not maybe oversaturated at that point.
One of the things that makes me nervous, which I think speaks to what Emily was saying, is that, I think many of you have seen Quentin demonstrate the alternative editor he's working on that will allow folks who are less comfortable in code to do a lot of basic things by just clicking checkboxes and drop-downs and things. Well, he's coded most of that. I know he's done some of it himself, but a lot of what that is vibe coding, right? He's using an AI to draft it. And one of the conversations he and Bryce and I have started having is, how comfortable are we releasing a body of code that we don't really know what's in it because we didn't draft most of it? And how comfortable do we feel maintaining that? And Quentin is very output oriented. If it works, it works. If we can test it and make sure that it does what it's supposed to do, and then he's happy with it. I think Bryce and I are maybe closer to the same page, where I get really uncomfortable with the idea that I don't understand how it works, and that it's not as efficient as it could be, and things like that. And I don't know, this is just sort of a conversation we're having about, like, where does it need to be at for us to be comfortable with this being a thing that we release and then maintain for the foreseeable future? How do we feel about maintaining something when, the only way to maintain it is potentially to ask an AI to fix the bug? So I don't have an answer to that yet, but it is a conversation we've started having, because that's the first piece of code that we might consider releasing, even though it wasn't hand coded.
Well, I mean, code is still code, right?
It is,
and I think there are two
a
parts of
Docassemble
that.
interview is
One
much
is
more
aesthetic.
narrow.
One is it? I want to say graceful. That's not the right word, but pretty simple code. And some of it is just clunky and it gets what you're done. But I think, not to diminish your skills, Sam, but I have really high estimations of both Bryce and Quentin. And I think if they wanted to understand it, they could. I don't think it's writing code that neither one of them can break down and understand. I think it's just saving them a lot of time, and they could always go back and read it. It may not be the prettiest code, may not be the most elegant way to do it, but it's so I'm
curious to hear what Michelle says, because I know she's closer to where Bryce is
Bryce
at.
and Quentin can't understand. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm curious about your take, Michelle.
So, yes, each line of the code that it writes is readable. As a whole, though, it has no unifying concept. So that means that it writes duplicate code everywhere. It has these patterns that are very hard as a human to track and to maintain. So editing any large body of code that it creates becomes somewhat complicated and sometimes is not really maintainable. Um, and I've also seen people go, well, it works and the LLM did it. I'm going to pass it and merge it in. So there's our human foibles, but even people who are very experienced with coding can, read every line of code, but can't maintain a code base that an LLM has written because it simply does not have the patterns we have, and does not have a model for the project as a whole, and it doesn't have a model for good code practices on that level. So there are a lot of things that it does complicate in a way that can make it unmaintainable, even for an experienced coder.
I think I have an example to illustrate what Michelle's getting at. Like, imagine you imagine you regularly have lists of things, and sometimes you want to output them as a comma-separated list. Sometimes you want it to be readable with an and, or sometimes it's an or list. Well, if maybe I've created my function that, I can pass it a list of names and it will reformat it as a comma-separated list with and. And then I ask the AI, well, I want the option to do it as an or. It might modify that function, but it might create a whole new function to do the same thing, and then another one for without either. And then when I go to maintain it, I may make a change to one of them and not realize that there's two others that I need to make the change to as well. I think that maybe illustrates your point, Michelle.
Yeah, that's a great example. That's a great
Yeah.
example.
And it's hard to know that until you read the code and analyze it and form your own mental model of it. And I think that is sort of what is the part of the issue. Yeah, I don't know.
Of course, playing devil's advocate, in 2 years, you can give your code to AI and say, make this pretty.
Well, and I've done that.
Use this model. Yeah, no, I mean,
Can you do that? Can you do that more simply? Is there a
Yeah.
simpler way to do that, for example?
Well,
Or
just like you use it for plain language.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, same thing. I mean, it's not as good as it. Well, I mean, you get varying results with human being. It's a human can often do it better. I just have to say this one thing, which is somewhat related, but not, is I've been doing a lot of research on this domestic violence stuff, and somebody is using ChatGPT and Claude to dump emails from abusive emails. You take the abusive email from the abuser, you dump it into ChatGPT or Claude and say, how can I respond to this in a non-provocative, calm manner? And I'm worried about my kid's safety or something like that, And again, you aren't going to just send that email, but those kinds of things are really helpful.
I do use it for that a lot too. And I think we'll probably make this a semi-annual or maybe just annual workshop, because we're all sort of at the beginning of dipping our toes into this. Like, Caroline has gone more towards like the AI maximalist end. I'm starting to play with it and finding useful things. Michelle's reluctant. Others are at various stages too. I'm curious to see in a year, how are we going to still feel about it? And maybe we'll finally have some answers to the actual environmental impact of it, so we can. I suspect Emily's right to be concerned, but I don't actually know how concerning it is yet, because we still don't have good data. But maybe we'll also have a better understanding of the role it can play in our workflows and stuff. And so maybe in a year we'll have more additional interesting things to say, and maybe the models will have evolved to the point to answer some of our concerns. So I think that's all for today. I think we can run, and thanks for your input, folks, and see you next month. have a great holiday and Happy New Year.